Welcome to my new podcast, Just Rambling. I started a blog. It'll be 20 years ago this June called Just Rambling. I started it to share my thoughts, and my thoughts often ramble, hence the name, share about my family and whatnot. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to honor the 20 years that I published there, varying readership. I always like to joke 2.48 readers. But in any case, what better way to honor that than to start a podcast and share some of the strange ramblings. So the ramblings are in my mind. I try to do it in a cohesive way. But if you want to check out my blog, I'll tell you more about that later in this podcast. So recently, in the last few days, I've been thinking about Paula White or Paula White Kane. She's a televangelist. A pastor, she has ministry, and she's also the senior advisor to the White House Faith Office. Now, no shade on her. I was married to a man for 16 years. We divorced. I remarried. I've been with my wife about 22 years. I am a divorcee. I remarried. So no shade on Paula. And just so you know, I'm going to refer to her as Paula White in today's podcast. It'll just make it easier. She was married 3 times. She's been married 3 times. Her first marriage happened in 1984. She married Dean Knight. Now, she was a teenager. She got pregnant. They got married. They did the right thing. She was young. No shade on her for that. They had a son together. So they got married in 1984. They divorced in 1989. Now, the story goes, she started going to church when she was 18. And the church she went to is where she would meet her second husband. His name is Randy White. He was the son of the pastor of the church. So some suggest that they started bonding before they were both divorced. Whatever. She was young. She did the right thing when she got pregnant, okay? But ultimately, both Randy and Paula divorced their spouses, and about a year later, they got married in 1990, and they stayed married until 2007. And then her final marriage is to her current husband, Jonathan Kane. Now, he may sound familiar to you, and rightly so. He is one of the original members and the keyboardist for the band Journey, the only band I paid to be in the fan club for in the 80s. I still like Journey, but he is part of that band. So anyways, going back a little bit of time, in the early 2000s, I worked for a credit union that was based in Southern California. And this credit union helped out Christian members, missionaries, and churches, ministries. Credit unions are financial institutions where the people who make deposits are members. And so they're almost like owners of the collective. And credit unions usually are formed around some sort of defining thing. Like, for example, the city of Dallas. If you live in Dallas or work in Dallas, there's a credit union for that. If you're a teacher, there's a credit union for that. Well, this credit union was geared for Christians, people in ministry, people who have the faith, churches, missionaries. And I worked there in the early 2000s. Now, when I started working there, it was very, like most credit unions are individual or consumer based. So, hey, it's a great place to get an auto loan from a credit union because you're quote unquote part owner, you get good rates, we're here to serve you, we have this collective. And that was the case when I first started there. It was really focused on individuals in ministries, missionaries, that sort of thing, some churches. And in fact, one of the things I was hired to support, I was a software support person initially, was we serviced tuition for Christian schools. So we would bill the parents of the students, we would receive and process their payments, we would send out statements, whatnot. But early in my tenure at this credit union, the focus or business model of the credit union changed dramatically. It went from the more standard credit union type of service, and it focused on commercial lending. Now, commercial lending is very different. It's usually real estate based, it's usually larger scale. And they started doing that. So most of their work moved to that. And that commercial lending was exclusively to churches or Christian organizations. So the model for the credit union went from initially saying, hey, my church needs a new roof. We need $75,000. And they would lend to that church and say, hey, we're here to make ministries more effective. We're not trying to make a lot of money. We're in this with you together. They went away from those smaller loans, or like, hey, we want to expand our sanctuary. We need $100,000. And the push was, hey, if it's not a loan for at least $10 million, we don't even want to consider that loan unless it's at least $10 million. So it went from small loans to individuals and, small churches to mega churches and big construction loans and all of that. So as this was happening, the credit union lent a pretty substantial loan. It was in the tens of millions to a church called Without Walls International Church. And that church happened to be pastored by Randy White and his wife. And it was a huge church. It was, the church had started out small, but at their highest, they had about 22,000 congregants in this church. It was a big deal. It was a construction loan, a lot going on. Well, at some point around 2008, the church wasn't making the required payments. And for the first time in the history of this Christian credit union, they filed foreclosure on the loan with Without Walls International Church. And it caused a lot of drama. First of all, the idea that a church, a ministry that was doing the work of the Lord, was being foreclosed on was kind of like, oh my gosh. And it was unheard of for the credit union, to be fair. There was a lot of back and forth between the church that said, hey, we've been making payments for 7.5 years, and now you're kind of being a jerk, credit union. And the credit union saying, hey, you're not fulfilling the requirements here, and you guys owe us a lot of money. The church came back and said, hey, we're going to sell the church, and we'll be able to pay the loan, and we'll have all the millions of dollars because someone wants to pay a lot of money. And then they accused the credit union, because of your bad press of filing this foreclosure, the sale backed out, so we're going to sue you for $28 million because that's the money we lost. And the credit union's all like, hey, we didn't do it. The sale was going through and you backed out days before it was closing, and we don't know why you did that. So there was all this craziness back and forth, When all of this was going on, Paula divorced Randy. And when she divorced him, she left to go pastor at a different church, took half the congregation. So that's cutting the income for this church in half. And on top of that, she took about $2 million worth of sound and other equipment out of the church. Now, that equipment technically had liens on it from the credit union for the loan that was in default. The church said, hey, credit union, you allowed her to take that. That's not our fault. And the credit union said, we didn't allow her to take that. Anyways, all of this, I'm giving you links to all this back and forth if you want to read about it. The church ultimately filed for bankruptcy. I missed a point. Randy, Paula had left. Randy stepped down. There was a point when he came back to pastor the church. But, ultimately when the church filed bankruptcy, both Randy and Paula said, hey, we weren't involved with that. That wasn't us. We have never filed bankruptcy for anything. So just to be clear, that's what they said. But I will add that Randy and Paula had been investigated by the Senate over the years of 2007 to 2011 for doing wrong things with finances. But I will be clear, nothing ever came of it. No charges were ever filed. It ended inconclusively. But what they were being investigated for is that the church was reported to have had spent $900,000 of tax-exempt ministry funds to pay the mortgage for the White's waterfront mansion. Those same tax-exempt funds were reported to have paid extended family members and also paid for the White's private jet. So other questionable things financially going on with this church. To add a little more drama to all this, Paula White is reported to be a proponent of prosperity theology, and that's the idea centered around financial and physical well-being. So if you financially give to ministry, which is basically giving to God. So some churches or Christians believe that by giving financially to churches or ministries, that you're giving to God and God will pour out his blessings on you heavily in the financial area, but also he'll make you healthier and he'll extend your life and that sort of thing. But there's a big push. In fact, I heard a pastor once say when he was asking for the offering at his church, churches often say tithing or 10% of your income should be given to the church. But this pastor said, I will always give 90% of what I make, because the more money I give to the church, the richer I become. I want to be a millionaire, and I'm going to give more of my money because I'm going to be a millionaire. I want to be rich. And the only way I'm going to get rich is by giving money to the church, because God will pour out the money on me. It's like winning the lottery. He said that from the pulpit. Anyways, Paula has been reported to preach this, but she claims she does not believe or follow prosperity theology. In the Christian Post, she straight out says, I do not believe in the prosperity gospel, as I've been accused of having it, she told them. I do believe that all good things come from God, and I also believe that God teaches us so much through our suffering. So she says, I don't adhere to that. I don't. And that's what she said, okay? However, this past week, Paula White Ministries on her YouTube channel, and I have a link in the comments, she shared a video that would suggest perhaps otherwise. She said in this video, for $1,000 or more in cash, if you send in $1,000 or more, you will get an angel assigned to you who will be the enemy of your enemies. You'll get prosperity. But wait a minute. I thought she said she doesn't believe in that. Okay. But she said you'll get prosperity if you do that. $1,000 or more. Sickness will go away. It'll be taken away by God. Your life will be extended. It would cause increase to your inheritance. And honestly, I didn't listen to all the videos, so I don't know if she was speaking of an inheritance on earth or in heaven, but she said it will cause an increase in your inheritance. And you'll have a special blessing for a year. And an added bonus, if you give $1,000 or more, we'll send you a beautiful 10-inch Waterford crystal cross. Now, in the video, she also references lower amounts, and there's different gifts involved. But if you really want to be blessed, that outpouring of God's blessing, that specific angel that will be the enemy of your enemies, you got to give at least $1,000. And side note, I rolled my eyes a little bit when I watched the portions of the YouTube video, but I really enjoyed the comments on the YouTube video. They were hilarious, so you may want to check those out. And so anyways, she says she's not into the prosperity gospel. Yes, she says, hey, you want prosperity? Give $1,000 this Easter and over Passover. And a lot of the theologians aren't picking up what she's laying down. Jason Goodham, he's a Minneapolis pastor, and he has a podcast called Being Lutheran. He said, if you give Paula White $1,000, the only thing you'll ever be is poor in every conceivable way imaginable. Now, going back to when I was a commercial underwriter at the credit union, and I should say that the credit union was based out of the Baptist denomination. So very different. They don't adhere to the prosperity gospel idea. As a credit union, in our policy, we pushed back hard against the prosperity theology. So when I would underwrite loans, a part of that underwriting process was looking at the church bylaws, making sure that there was adequate governance over the pastor if there are any hints of prosperity gospel theology in their bylaws or in their ministry outreach or anything that we underwrote. Our policy said we need to push back, and that could come back with changes to the bylaws, discussions with the leadership or the board of the church or the council members, whatever their structure was. That's the policy. But in practice, remember I was saying that only $10 million loans are better. We don't want to waste our time on smaller loans because the money was in the big loans. Unfortunately, in practice, most of those big loans were coming from churches that were kind of prosperity churches. I mean, they were the ones that wanted to have the mega-sized churches. They were the ones that wanted the money to build their third or fourth mega-sized churches. And hey, by the way, since we have all these churches all over the place, we need another loan to have a helicopter fly between these churches on the weekends so I can preach at all these different churches, or maybe a private jet, or we need another house built for the pastor. He needs another mansion for the other areas of the church. So bottom line, in practice, the credit union I worked for loved prosperity churches because they were the one wanting all the loans that we were making all that money off of. Seeing Paula White back in the news this week, it got me to thinking again, what is going on? And I just don't mean about the whole you can buy your blessings with a donation thing. There are more layers to this. So I worked at the credit union for 6 years, and per the president, weeks before I left the credit union, I was a rising star. I had by that time received several promotions. I had been proven to be a fast learner, and I was offered high productivity. I could get a lot done. I helped make a lot of money for the credit union. I was well liked by my coworkers and the churches we served. And then one day, the credit union found out that I was in a relationship with Gina. We had met there. She had already left the credit union by this point, but they found out that I was in a relationship with her, and everything changed at that moment. So at the time, we had staff meetings every week, and basically it was a chapel. We had a time of worship. Someone would speak, like the president, other leaders, or maybe a guest speaker, and it was a gathering every week like chapel. But because of them finding out about me and Gina, I was part of the worship band, and they said I could no longer play the drums every week because of my moral failure. I was told by HR that I was being considered if I could remain a manager because of my moral failure. Even my very position with the firm was under question because I was in a homosexual relationship with Gina. And they informed me that despite the fact that they were a credit union functioning as a commercial lender, that they had filed the year before as a religious organization, and they told, their words, not mine, that they could legally discriminate against me for being a homosexual because of that religious organization filing. On a side note, this is a bad time for me, and I'm not going to get into the play-by-play, but there's far too much judgment in the Christian space. Here is an example of a Facebook post from 16 years ago. I was just sharing excitement that I had a great night and I was going to be able to see my cousin that day. I hadn't seen my cousin in years, and this was just a few months after I separated from the credit union. And this pretty blasé post, I was just sharing excitement about seeing my cousin. I got called out for not mentioning that I was going to church. Like, maybe I should go to church and then go see my cousin. And this was a coworker that I had at the credit union. She knew about my separation from the credit union and why I was separated. And this is the kind of thing like, okay, fine. You think I should go to church? Okay. But anyways, jump forward 20 years to today. Many of my coworkers that I knew from that time at the credit union, most of them don't work at the credit union anymore. Some of them do, but most of them don't. A lot of them today are Trump supporters. And what's funny that I find with that is they have no issue with Trump's infidelity in all three of his marriages, nor the fact that he bragged about grabbing women by their body parts, whether they liked it or wanted it or not. And that's fine, but they also think that it was appropriate that I was separated from the credit union because of my moral failure of being in a monogamous relationship with a person that is the same sex that I am. They applaud Paula White's position on Trump's being on his government, and nobody seems to bring up the fact that the credit union we all worked for was in a years-long battle with Paula White and her husband at the time for not paying a loan we issued to their church. They forget about all of that. And there's no calling out how she obviously supports the prosperity message that was against the policy of our credit union. And this is what I'm saying is there's more to this than this. And this is what has been rambling around in my head, like what is going on. Religious leaders, at least in America, and I don't want to say everybody, but religious leaders are quick to bring up, hey, look, all of us have sinned when talking about Trump's footprint against women, minorities, his nonprofit that got shut down because he was using the funds illegally and he was told he can never have a nonprofit again. Same with his university. It was shut down because he wasn't providing an education. He has a way of signing contracts with people and then not paying for the work done under those contracts. People like Franklin Graham says, hey, come on, no one's perfect. All of us have sinned. We need to forgive them. And there's not everybody's all bad. And I agree with that message. But at the same time, people like Franklin call out other sins, like saying pride is like celebrating lying, adultery, and murder. It's frustrating because we're encouraged to give people like Trump and even Paula White a pass because they're in the church or they're representing what we feel is not a moral failure, or we give passes for the moral failures, like not paying your loans, selling God's favor, cheating on your spouses. But if the people involved are gay or minorities or liberals, then hey, that's sin and you need to change because that's like lying, adultery, and murder. It feels like too many in the Christian faith and the people I used to work with celebrate Trump's actions, past and current, no matter how vile they are. Because remember, he bragged about grabbing women's body parts, but that's somehow different from people in the LGBTQIA plus community holding pride parades or pride events or having their pride flags up. That's different. And it's tiring. It's tiring. Anyway, I think it's important for me to say this. Everyone should be able to hold their beliefs. And they shouldn't be persecuted for it. They should be able to vote how they see fit to vote. But if those beliefs are used to penalize someone or limit their ability for, I don't know, living life, getting married, loving someone who's a consenting adult, getting medical treatment, that's not right. And when you apply those beliefs and they vary based on who you're applying those beliefs to, like, well, Trump, all of us have sinned. We need to have grace and forgiveness towards him. but different for people like gay people who are like murderers for holding pride events. That's a problem. That's a problem. And these are the things that bother me. This is what goes in my head. If you say the prosperity gospel is wrong, and if your policy states that, don't lend your Christian organization funds to prosperity gospel churches, even if they're lucrative transactions. If a pastor has a multi-million-dollar mortgage on his church and it's foreclosed on, maybe they aren't the best person to look for financial information or how God works with finances. If you hold moral standards for one group but not to another, are they really standards? Are they really something to be proud of? I question that. I also want to say, I don't think I'm better than Trump or any of my former co-workers that view things differently than I am. I don't think I'm better than them. I don't want their lives to be harder because they voted for Trump, or they're not making a big deal about Paula White's obvious prosperity gospel alignment, or her past financial transactions with a credit union. I don't want to call out Trump and Paula for being married 3 times, even though part of my moral failure that was called out is that I divorced my husband and I was in a relationship after that when divorce is not really in alignment with my Christian faith. That was called out for me. So, but I don't call that out for Paula and Trump. I just find it hard to swallow when that was brought up for me. Plus, of course, the fact that I was with a woman. But I'm really saying let's all commit to looking in the mirror. Maybe even start using critical thinking skills and at least admit there's some hypocrisy going on here. Double standards. Things are not being applied fairly. And the judgment there is kind of skewed. So if you heard Paula's message and you think, I want to give $1,000, I want those blessings, go for it. I'm not sure it's biblical. That's my belief, but I'm not going to knock you for that. But I'm just asking, don't knock me because I'm in a monogamous relationship for over 20 years in a loving relationship and say that my relationship is a moral failure. Okay. So anyways, that's my rambling. You can tell that this is not necessarily structured. I hope that you enjoyed this. I would love to hear your comments on this. I'm not a victim. I don't think about this very much. My life has been so blessed after having left that credit union, after Gina and I came out. My life is rich, abundantly rich, and I don't make $1,000 donations to people like Paula White. I'm not knocking people that make money. Every year I hope that my annual raise is a good one. But my focus is not making more money or having an angel to be the enemy of my enemies. I just want to live my life. I want to bless the people I interact with, regardless of their backgrounds, even Paula White. So anyways, thank you for listening today. If you don't agree with me, especially if you don't agree with me, I would love to hear your opinions on this. Feel free to check out my blog, justrambling.blog. I will have notes for this as well as the links that I got information regarding this. And you can see some of the stories if you want, and like the YouTube I referenced. And please share with your friends, and we'll see what happens with the next episode of Just Rambling, because it's kind of all in my head. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.